Maddie, welcome to Permastoked. How are you?
I'm so good. It's so nice to meet you, Derik. How are you doing
Yeah,
today?
it's nice to meet you as well. I'm glad you got the double shakas there. I can tell you're stoked and ready to go. What time is it in Ontario right now?
It's 2 o'clock. It's
Two
two here.
o'clock on Father's
Yeah.
Day. Right on. What are you doing for Father's Day?
My dad and I and my brother actually, we just got off the water. We came from a little Father's Day paddle and
Oh,
yeah.
sweet. Yeah. So
Yeah.
where'd you go out for that?
We just went to the Welland Canal because I'm from Welland, so it's
Okay.
probably like a 5-minute drive. And yeah, it's super flat water, like very, very beginner, easy spot, and just a nice spot if you want like a really calm paddle.
Right on. Excellent. Well, it's good to talk to you. It was a good excuse for me to, get up a little earlier and get ready for this. I'm a
Yeah,
little
because
too,
what time is it for you over there?
yeah, it's, what is it, 11 a.m., but this whole COVID life has me kind of extending my morning sleeps a little more than they're used to. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Same here. It's a struggle to get up like anytime before like 8 or 9. I've
yeah.
been finding so.
So what is that COVID-19 life like for you so you're living in Welland. What does that look like currently now that we're in June?
Yeah, so I guess that because we're in month 3, like I've definitely been getting a good solid routine down. So during the week, I try to wake up early, but again, that's not always the easiest thing. So I get up anywhere between kind of 8 or 9, and then I hit the water as soon as I can. We've been having fantastic weather here, so I've been going paddling almost every single day of the week.
Nice.
Yeah, so I get my workout in the morning, and then the afternoon I kind of schedule myself to sit down and work on my master's thesis. And then I've been really getting into cooking too, so I've been helping my family make dinners.
Right
And then
on.
yeah, I kind of just hang out, chat with friends when I can in the
Yeah.
evening. And
What's been on the menu?
I love fish, so like anything fish.
Nice.
I love making pasta. um My dad and I made these like turkey burgers this weekend. Oh my God, so good.
Sweet.
So good. Yeah.
So you're out on the Great Lakes. What kind of fish do you like?
Ooh, you know what? My dad and I, we haven't like gone out fishing since I was very, very little.
Okay.
And yeah, my dad used to be the one who would like go out to Lake Erie, catch some fish and bring it home for dinner.
Hmm.
But I'd have to ask him what kind it was because
Okay, yeah.
I honestly don't even know what we ate.
Gotcha. Yeah, because out here in Vancouver, we can't get that good perch and pickerel that you guys have.
That's right.
I
That's
miss that.
right.
I miss that. Yeah, but I can't complain about the salmon and everything else. It's pretty incredible.
I was gonna say you are pretty lucky with the salmon out
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there.
So, going out paddling during COVID times, is there any shaming going on, or are people pretty cool about, seeing people out and about as long as they're being respectful of space?
Definitely. Yeah. Like I think the lines were very, very blurry when COVID first happened.
Hmm.
A lot of our water access here along the Great Lakes and like on the Welland Canal was mostly and essentially all cut off. And so a lot of people thought, well, what's the harm in being out in the lake? And especially for stand-up paddleboarding, you're all by yourself. Like you're not really, unless you're paddling in a big group, then you're not really being a harm to anybody. Um, but personally, it was a very difficult thing to deal with because just the image of you being out there and some other people around the world didn't have that opportunity to still get out. So for myself personally, I actually took a good solid 4 to 5 weeks off when the pandemic first kind of hit mid-March. But then, yeah, I was back on the water, I think early May.
Yeah.
And I felt so happy to be back. I was like, this is my passion, this is my love. And to have that taken away for, I know 4 to 5 weeks doesn't sound long, but for me, that was really hard.
Yeah.
But it was a
Yeah.
sacrifice I was willing to make. But
Right
yeah,
on.
it's been good. Like definitely now, like today when I was out with my dad and my brother, there was so many people out there on paddle boards too. So I was very
Nice.
happy to see the communities going strong.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I did the same. I wasn't sure what was going on. I didn't want to go out there and look like I was some entitled person, or, I was better than others. So I stayed indoors too. And then things started to lax a little bit. People were like, no, the government was saying, go outside, get your exercise. So then I thought, okay, so I got my paddleboard and I went to where I was usually launched from, because I had emailed the city and they said, oh yeah, being in the water is fine. But like you said, water access. So when I went to where I launched from, the parking lot was closed, right? Because it's a park. So there were kind of
Mm.
these barriers like that. So I had to find a sort of secret entry spot into the water. So yeah, and now I'm noticing more and more people. But what I really enjoyed about it in the beginning was, well, first of all, I'm usually fairly alone anyhow in the harbor in Vancouver. There's usually a lot of kayakers, not as many suppers. But at first, when I was out there, I was fairly alone. And I'll tell you what was really cool were the seals were in full throttle. It's like they had been undisturbed for so long, and they were suddenly like very playful. And I had one like went right under my board and came up from behind and kind of splashed. That was cool, because normally they sort of maintain a distance. Yeah.
They really do. I was actually kind of paddling in your area last year because I traveled out to Sydney for the CSA Sup Nationals, and that was the first time I had paddled among sea lions, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And yeah, but usually they're not playful like that. Like they kind of keep their distance because
Yeah. Yeah.
they know you're coming by. But that's actually really neat, because I was going to ask you like where you primarily paddle and what it's been like for you. But I'm so glad you've been able to get on the water, and even if you have to be a little sneaky about it. And
Yeah. 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 So where'd you go when you were out here in BC?
I was on Vancouver Island, and the competition was held in Sydney, BC. So I was kind of sad because I've always wanted to go to Tofino,
Yeah,
and
I
I
was gonna
couldn't
ask.
believe that I was on the opposite end of the island.
Uh,
And my brother came with me, but it was a super quick weekend. Like I basically got fresh off the plane, competed, and then hopped right back on and was back at work Monday by noon. Like it was a very quick weekend. But
yeah.
it's stunning where you guys are. Like I love the West Coast. So
Yeah. It's
very
amazing.
lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to hit that up. You got to take some time next time and spend some time in Tofino. It's literally breathtaking. So beautiful. I would live there and settle and never come back in a second if life permitted. Yeah, it's pretty
If life
amazing.
permitted.
Yeah, yeah,
I hear that a lot from friends and family who have been to
yeah.
Tofino.
It's pretty
So
wicked. Yeah, but that Niagara on the Lake area isn't too bad either.
no, I personally love Niagara on the Lake. It's
Yeah.
where actually my summer job is. I work for a company called Paddle Niagara, where we teach stand-up paddleboarding and provide lessons and rentals. And we launch at Queens Royal Park, so it's just at the mouth of the Niagara River where it meets Lake Ontario, and you can see Toronto right across the way if the day is clear. And yeah, we're very lucky to be able to paddle
Nice.
there.
Yeah. You stay away from those falls though, right?
That's right. So technically where we paddle is like the lower Niagara River. So geographically, even if we paddled upriver, it's literally impossible to go over the falls, because you'd hit Queenston Heights first and then the
Gotcha.
rapids, which is just as dangerous, and then the whirlpool, and then Niagara Falls. You'd be at the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yeah. I don't want to hear about you being the first woman to go over the falls on a supboard.
On
Okay.
a subboard, that's right. We
Yeah.
have a lot of crazy stories of daredevils of the falls, but
Yeah.
none on a paddleboard.
In
So
barrels and things. Yeah.
yeah.
So right on. So hey, you've mentioned some sup and things like this. So why don't you tell us all about who is Maddi Leblanc, and let's explore your life a little bit. Tell the audience what you're all about.
What a great question.
The
um
question.
the question, that's right. Yeah, so I'm 23 years old. I'm from Welland, Ontario, Canada. So I'm born and raised in the heart of the Niagara region. And I think my story is pretty cool how I got into stand-up paddleboarding, because even though we have the Welland Canal here and it runs right through the heart of the city, I never grew up on the water. I never grew up doing any sport on the water. I think the first water sport I did try was rowing, and that was like grade 8 summer gym course going into high school. And even then, getting in a boat, I just kind of was like, this is okay. Like, not a huge fan, but it's cool. And then I think a few years after that, my family and I, we went to Lake Huron because we would vacation in Sauble Beach. And these two men, like one day, were just walking along the beach with these giant yellow Nash sup boards. And I remember being a kid and them looking like giant bananas or something. Like, it just totally attracted my eye. And I looked at my parents and I said, what is that? Like, what are those things? And they had no idea either. Like, we had never seen anything like them. And so the men went out for their paddle. And then when they came back in, we went up to them and we asked them, hey, what are these things that you're carrying and standing on? And they said, oh, these are stand-up paddle boards. Would you like to try? And that question has honestly changed my life so much, because ever since that moment, a lot of the choices I've done and the actions I've chosen to take in throughout the rest of my life have been around stand-up and how can I get myself on the water. So
that's when you got stoked.
Yeah, that's exactly when I got stoked. Yeah, and that story is like a big part of who I am. Like, I think I wouldn't be sitting in front of you having this conversation if that moment never happened. And
I'm glad those were sup boards you saw, and not, like those Iron Man water jetpacks or like an e-foil board or something, because at least you could afford a paddleboard, right?
Oh yeah, but that took me a while though to save up. Like,
okay.
So because I was pretty little, I worked a few babysitting jobs for the next, I think it was like 2 or 3 summers.
Wow.
And I saved all my money. Like, I remember putting it in a piggy bank and being like, this is for my paddleboard. And I think it was a few Christmases later, my parents said, we'll help you buy a board, but you have to pay for half and it'll be your only Christmas present. And I didn't even hesitate. I was like, done. Okay, got it.
So what was your first board?
My first board, it literally looked like a candy cane. It had white and red stripes along the deck pad. And I think it was a 10-6 Jimmy Sticks or Stikes. I don't know how you say the name. And yeah, it was just a classic all-round sup board. I think it was maybe 27 inches wide. So it was pretty wide. But yeah, nice. It was a great board. I love that board.
What's in your quiver these days?
What's in my quiver? Well, no longer that board. I parted ways with that board just last year, and it was actually really hard to let go of because it was so sentimental.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I have primarily stand-up paddleboarding race boards. So I am semi-sponsored by Starboard. So I have a 12.6 by 23 All-Star and a 14 by 23 and a half All-Star race as well.
Wow, those are getting pretty narrow.
They are. They really are, yeah. But I love it though. Like, I feel like I've definitely worked my way down in the width of the board.
Nice, yeah. So you see these dudes out on the lake and they got paddle boards and you find out what those are. So then where's the story go from there?
So the story basically goes, I started paddling, I guess, in high school. I think by that time I would have been about grade 11 when I got that first board. But a year prior, I actually had 2 friends of mine who were pretty close to me, who passed away from 2 different kinds of cancer. One was glioblastoma, and that was my friend Julia Turner. And glioblastoma is like a super aggressive form of a brain tumor. So when she was diagnosed, we all were like, oh no, this isn't good. And her battle with cancer lasted for about 7 months. And then she passed away in December of 2011. And then my next door neighbor, Lynn Lambert, she was 37 when she passed away due to a rare form of skin cancer. And she had passed away first, actually, in that same year. So in March of 2011.
Wow.
So losing those two friends was absolutely heart-wrenching. Like, there's no words to describe how not only myself but my whole community, how Welland was feeling at that time. And I think paddleboarding, again, it came at such a great time in my life, because being able to get on the water, not even a year later, it allowed me to generate the idea of a fundraiser called On Board. And the first year I hosted that was in 2014. And so I think, paddleboarding really truly saved my life, and it saved a lot of my friends' lives by having this avenue to like express yourself out on the water and to be happy. And I think I just thought, well, I'm really happy doing this one thing that I really love, so why not take it and apply it to something really good and make a fundraiser out of it.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible that a tragedy sparked something so good, right?
Yeah. Like, when I tell that story, it sounds kind of like sunshine and rainbows. But but there was definitely a lot of hard days too, right? Like, leading up to that moment, it was very, very sad. Like, there was days where like I couldn't even get out of bed. I was like, what am I gonna do? And my parents would be like, go for a paddle. Like, just take your board out. Like, let's go. Come on, let's go enjoy the sun. And I think that's why in everything that I do in my life, even now up to this point, if I'm struggling with something, or if I'm dealing with an issue in my head that I'm like, hey, how do I figure this out? The first thing I do is say, all right, where's the paddleboard? We're going for a paddle.
Yeah, that's what my wife says anytime I'm pissing her off. Go for a paddle.
Hey, Derik, honey.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us the specifics about what is On Board. What's that all about? What's it look like? When is it? All those kind of things.
Yeah. So On Board, it's really evolved a lot over the years. So the first year that I hosted it was in 2014. And that year I actually paddled 10 kilometers down the Welland Canal all by myself, because I just kind of had this vision of somebody like Terry Fox in my head. And I just thought, what if I paddle a distance instead of like running a distance? And so I'll never forget actually that first year when I came back to the shore, I looked at my parents and I said, okay, that was great. Like, yay, that was really hard, but I'm done. Like, this was a great year. Like, we remember Julia and Lynn. Like, we're going to put this to bed now. But after, when I started going around and talking to all my friends and other family members that had come out to watch me paddle and cheered me on at the end, a lot of them had said like, oh, Maddie, can I join you next year? Like, this looks like so much fun. Can I get out on the water too? And so I looked at my parents and I thought, oh, okay, like, I guess we got to do this again. And they were like, yep, like, we fully support, like, let's do it. And so I think for a few years we kept saying, okay, this is the last year. This is the last year. And then more and more people just started to come out. And so I think by year 4, we just said, all right, enough. Like, we have to just admit that we're going to keep this going.
This is a thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So every year it's looked a little bit different. We've had different sponsors. We've paddled different distances, always at the same venue. But essentially it's just a fun day out on the water, paddling anywhere between 5 to 10 kilometers to remember 2 very, very special people in our community.
Wow. Congratulations. That's fantastic. That's some really good initiative coming from a young person. That's super. Yeah. So how is the money collected then? Are people sponsored for racing, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the money is all collected through the Canadian Cancer Society. And so actually the really cool thing about working with them is that last year I was able to speak with a research officer. And so we actually got to pick specific projects that were related to brain cancer research that we wanted the money to directly go to. So people and sponsors could either donate online, or they could hand in cash to me and then I would bring it to the office. We have one here in St. Catharines, and that was always kind of fun because you get to hold up like the big check and say, this is how much we raised. And yeah, so a lot of different ways for people to donate, but at the end of the day, it all goes into the same pot and the same research, and that makes me really happy.
Right on. Are people coming with their own boards, or do you have supply boards for anyone without them, or?
Yeah, so that's very much changed, yeah, throughout the years. Like the first year I just said, hey, if you have a board, bring it.
Yeah.
But now that we have so many sponsors that are on board, they bring their own boards as well. And so we get a huge mix. Like I think last year we had 102 paddlers, either
Wow.
102 or like 104, something like that. We had quite a few paddlers with us on the water, and I would say probably about half brought their own boards, and then the other half were borrowed from our sponsors.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of paddles in the water. Really cool.
It really is. It really is. It's pretty cool when you're standing there and then you get to look back and see everybody behind you. It's there's nothing that describes that feeling. Like it's better than Christmas. Like it's so good. It's amazing.
And so you're currently in school as well, right?
I am. Yep. I'm currently continuing my studies at Brock. I'm doing a master's thesis in the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences underneath Tim O'Connell in Recreation and Leisure. So
Nice.
I love what I'm studying.
Yeah. So where do you see yourself going with all this, SUP stuff and your experience with school? And you're very much environmentalist as well, are you not?
Yes. Yeah. So actually, my undergrad, which I just graduated from last year, was from the University of Waterloo in Environment and Resource Studies. So I literally went to school with a bunch of hippies, and it was absolutely fantastic. And my undergrad thesis actually was a combination of stand-up paddleboarding and environmentalism. And I
What?
wanted
You
to.
went to school for stand-up paddleboarding? Come on.
That's right. Actually.
Oh, why was I learning book stuff when I could have been paddling? Jeez.
It's kind of a funny story actually. When I wrote my proposal and submitted it to the University of Waterloo, a lot of the professors in the Faculty of Environment, they kind of looked at me and they were like, "Kate, really? Like you want to apply stand-up paddleboarding to environmentalism? Like what's the deal here?" And I just said, "Well, these are my two passions. Like I love stand-up paddleboarding, and it's given me this whole new perspective on the environment and has made me care about the environment so much more since I've gotten involved in this activity. And I want to explore if it has done the same for other paddlers."
Yeah.
And so one of my professors, his name is Dr. Stephen Murphy, but everybody called him Smurf. He just was that one standout professor that saw my idea and was like, "Yep, I'll be your supervisor. I'll let you totally research that." And
Nice.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, so I'm very lucky. I had a great professor to support me through that.
So what kind of ill effects have you seen on our waters? What is it that bothers you, and what do you think we got to do about it?
Ooh, I was going to ask you that question because I'm
Oh,
so curious as to like what Vancouver and like the West Coast just in general is like, because I mean, you probably remember a bit here on the Great Lakes because you grew up around here. But it really depends on where you paddle. Like
yeah.
when I interviewed paddlers from Toronto, a lot of them had said like we see spillage coming over from our sewer system because it's so old, right? And especially after a big flood, it clogs up and everything overflows and comes back into the lake. So around Toronto, a lot of paddlers were like, it's gross. But here in Niagara, you didn't see that as much. Even though we definitely have some problems here too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but yeah, I think definitely it was location that determined what we see, and definitely what I see too. Like I think springtime is pretty bad. Like after a snow melt, everything that got caught up in the snow really ends up in the waterways here.
Yeah.
But
You
yeah,
know,
I'm curious. What do you see where you are?
I'll tell you, I saw a guy a few days ago walking down the sidewalk, and he had something. I don't know if it was a drink or whatever, but anyhow, when he was finished with it, he just threw it on the ground. And I thought, like, who does that anymore? Like, that's so 90s. Like, it just seems so out of place. But yeah, well, in the early days when I started surfing in the late 90s, early 2000s on Lake Erie, there were quite a bit of E. coli days in the summertime, right? And so it was advised not to be in the water. But when you're a surfer, that's sort of hard to abide by when the waves are as you know, only come so often with the right kind of fetch. So when there's waves, you're out there. So I was swimming and falling and surfing in E. coli water, and it could be dirty, and I'd come up in, brown stuff, and it could be pretty gross. And I'll tell you now, if I were to surf there, I'd probably go out on my sup instead and just sup surf, avoid going in the water if I can. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so biased, but I love sup surfing. Like,
Yeah.
I was out there, not last week, but the week before, and I was the only one on a sup surf, and everyone's sitting there on their boards and they're looking at me like, who's this kook on the sup? But I'm like, I like the view from up here.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me since I've been out there, been out there surfing. I imagine that you have quite an advantage on a stand-up these days. I mean, because a lot of those waves are pretty small and mushy and can be hard to get up on, even a longboard sometimes, let alone a shortboard. I mean, so you're out there, you're already standing. You probably can get some pretty good wave count under your belt.
Yeah, it's actually, that's a very good point. I think that's why I do choose to sup surf more so on the Great Lakes. I went to Nicaragua once with a company called Surf the Greats, and I fell in love with surfing there just in general. I think I was on like your typical kook board, like an 8-foot wave storm, but I loved it, and it really made me want to get into shortboarding. But then when I came back and I remembered seeing like the sets of the Great Lakes, I just was like, man, there's no time in between these waves. Like, it's not like the ocean at all. It's very messy. And yeah, just a sup surf like board, it's bigger in general, right? Mm-hmm. So you're gonna catch a lot. Yeah. So I do prefer the sup surf because I do find it's way easier to catch a wave than it is on a short board or a long board.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that trip, that was with Antonio was leading that trip?
It was. Yes, it was
Nice.
with Antonio, Aaron Black, Jake Kanovich. Like, he was on it. He filmed on days like these. So
Jake Kovnat.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Jake, I butchered your name. But yeah, he was there. He was our photographer and did some filming as well. And then Seymour Wood and Maddie Yu were some of our other surf instructors as well.
Nice, very cool, yeah. So, being a racer, I imagine that stand-up paddleboard surfing, it can be pretty humbling, even for the best, flat water paddler, racer, whatever, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, I think there's so many times where I'm on my race board and I don't want to fall off. Like, I just do everything that I can, like pivot turn wise, like bracing myself with my paddle. I do everything to stay on my board. But when I'm sup surfing, it's like you have to let that go because you're gonna fall in and you're gonna look weird. And especially with a big paddle in your hands and like trying to get back on your board, like it's gonna look awkward. But the second that you get comfortable and finally figure out the rhythm, especially of the Great Lakes, it's a lot of fun and very humbling. I like that word a lot. It really sums up Great Lake surfing, I think, in general.
Those pivot turns by the end of the season, I'm feeling really good. You got your pivot turns down. I've taught them to, multiple students over the summer. And then, the winter comes, you have a few months off, and then you get back out there. And that's pretty humbling too. It's like, God, why doesn't those pivot turn skills just come back instantly? You got to kind of takes a day or two to kind of hone those back. I have some pretty embarrassing spills. I'm out there. It's like, I'm a sup instructor. Bam, in the water.
I can't even tell you how many moments like that I've had. Like, I'm so glad you said that. It's so true. And like, especially around here in the winter, like I don't even think I attempt pivot turns, to be honest, like, because I'm in a full dry suit and I know that if I fall in, like, I'll be okay. But there's still this part of me, like in the back of my head, that's like, okay, you don't want to fall in, you don't want to fall in. And especially when you're in front of a student, because you just want to be like, I'm the instructor, I know what I'm doing. But I think falling in, though, it's like you said, it's very humbling. And I do think it makes you a better paddler. I think it's so necessary to take those spills. But yeah, definitely in the winter, I feel you. Like I don't practice them as often. And every spring comes around and I look down and I'm like, where are my feet? Like what happened to all my skills? So
Yeah, it must be nice to go paddleboarding and be able to just jump in the warm water after. I mean, for me, it's always a little chilly in the ocean, so I don't wear a wetsuit in the summertime. And you know, you'll warm up, but it's not like the Great Lakes. It's not like that warm bath water, kind of refreshing to fall in sometimes, right, on those hot summer days.
Yeah. So what do you actually wear when you're out there, like in the summer?
For paddleboarding, you know, flat water, whatever, just wearing shorts and shirts, like, you know, normal stuff. But if you're going sup surfing, then you're wearing a wetsuit always. But in the summertime, you don't have to wear a 5'6" or anything. Well, you can, but you can get away with you know, 4'3" or maybe even a 3'2" actually. But yeah, you're always wearing a wetsuit. Yeah, when you're surfing anyhow. So
That's crazy.
yeah. So then tell us how you made the jump into competitive sup then.
Yeah, so that to me too, that actually wasn't like a natural choice as well. Like I always grew up doing competitive sports. Like I danced and played very high intensity soccer for 13 years growing up. But after creating On Board, I think it was in my second or third year. Yeah, maybe third year. I'm trying to think back. It's so long ago now. The second or third year I hosted On Board, one of my sponsors, Osmosis Sup Surf, they're just out of Porto Luzzi, so not too far down the road from us.
Is that St. Catharines?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
it is St. Catharines. Yeah, so that's they're close to Lake Ontario, right by there. But yeah, so those guys, they had shaped a race board and brought it to On Board. And they said, oh, Maddie, like, do you want to try out this board for the charity paddle this year? And I looked at them and I said, there's race boards? Like, what? Are you serious? And they said, yeah, like races happen all around the world. And I couldn't believe it. I was shocked at how long this board was. I think it was a 12'6" board. So now to me too, that's crazy because boards are so much longer and there's even unlimited. It's crazy. But yeah, I hopped on that board and I fell in love with how much faster I could go. And I think my competitive spirit really was like, ooh, I like this. I like the feeling of this. And so when I came home after On Board that year, I had researched like everything about sup racing and I just loved it. I loved the pictures I was seeing. I was seeing Connor Baxter in Hawaii, like on these massive swells, like Molokai to Oahu. And I fell in love with that idea because other than having the feeling of the flat Welland Canal, I didn't really know how else you could take sup racing. Yeah. So it took a while, but I think a year after that, I tried out my first sup race. And that story was pretty funny too. My mom and I, we had drove up to Barrie, which is I think it's about 2 hours from Welland, but with traffic, sometimes everybody going up north, it can be about 3. And so we get there after a very long drive. I did a 1 kilometer square loop of a race. So I come back in and I'm so happy. I'm so stoked because I came in second and I was like, okay, it's not first, but it's not last. Like, good job. And my mom looks at me and she goes, really, Maddie? We just drove like 2.5 to 3 hours to get here for an 11-minute race. And so we both laughed quite a bit after that, but those 11 minutes were enough to hook me onto the race scene for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. That's one thing I haven't done yet. I wanted to get into that this year, but with all this COVID stuff, obviously that's been kind of put on hold. But you must have to be pretty good at your pivot turns to get around the cones in there, don't you?
That's right. And pivot turns for me were, oh man, this would have been my 5th year racing with the Ontario Sup Series. And I would say just really this year, I'm feeling super confident in my pivot turns. Like for me, it was definitely not something natural. And it was it was a very big learning curve for me, but I think the racing scene forces you to really nail your pivot turns. Like, you cannot not know how to do a pivot turn.
Yeah.
I think if you want to get into racing.
So do you have your Paddle Canada certification for teaching?
Oh, you know what? I actually don't, but I really want to.
Oh, okay.
I'm currently WPA level 1 SUP instructor certified.
Okay.
But yeah, I think, do you know Christy Wright Shell? I think she's from your area.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've talked to her about it, and I'm like, man, I got to get Paddle Canada. Like, it's a pretty cool course. So
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Well, when I come home, if you want to take it, yeah, we can hook that up for sure.
Yeah, because I'm assuming that's what you're certified, right?
Yeah. Oh, but I'm not certified to instruct instructors yet, but I will be. That's next on my list. Yeah, because my instructor, when I did my advanced certification, he had us go as low as you can go on those pivot turns. It was pretty fun. We were pretty good by the end of that weekend. But then again, like you said, you go back out paddling, and how often do you really use that skill? Like, how often are you in a jam? You're like, God, I got to do a 180 right now, I even find with such a big harbor, I was telling my buddy, I'm like, I hardly even have to do a sweep stroke. Like, the turns, I mean, I know where I'm going. You just kind of, your direction, you just sort of get led there.
Yeah, that's so true. That's such a good point. Like, yeah, definitely. Like, if you don't practice them, like, it's a skill you can't lose easy. It's like working a lot of those twitch muscles in your legs, and like really activating muscles that you don't use every day and you don't use often. So yeah, I agree.
The upper legs just sort of shake, eh? They just kind of tremble those first couple times each year.
Oh, it's so true. And I tell my clients that all the time. Like, I tell them when I take them out on the water, and especially for the first time, I say, don't worry. Like, if your legs are shaking, it's not even you, and it's not because you're nervous. It's literally just because you're activating muscles that are not used to being worked. It's the same ones that you use if you slip on ice. And how often does that happen, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So you mentioned Hawaii. Have you been paddling in Hawaii before?
Oh, I haven't. No.
Oh, okay.
And it's somewhere I really want to go. Like, that's top of the bucket list.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. How about you? Have you been to Hawaii?
I've been to Hawaii. I've been paddleboarding up on the North Shore. Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
Pretty sweet,
That's amazing.
Home of the Duke Kahanamoku, the father of it all, and he was one of the first guys with the paddle out there.
That's right. That's totally right. Oh, that must have been incredible, eh? How long were you there for?
Oh, that was just a sort of week trip or something like that. Did a little bit of surfing on the North Shore, did some paddleboarding on the North Shore. There's sort of this river that goes in there in the town. Yeah, that's a dream place.
Oh.
So we talked about the SUP competition, but now tell us about this Team Canada stuff. And you went to China. You've represented. So how was that?
That's correct. Yes. Oh man, China was absolutely unbelievable. Like, if you were to tell me, let's say 5 years ago, when I first got into SUP racing, hey Maddie, you'd be going to China in 4 years, I would have said, nah, like you're joking. You're lying to me. That's not true. But it really was. I don't know if you believe in fate or destiny, but for me, I felt like it was a truly like a right place, the right time kind of a moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually finishing up school. So I was in my last year of my undergrad at the University of Waterloo. And one of my friends had called me up. Her name's Ariel Amaral. And she's actually a pretty big racer too around here in Southern Ontario. So she is someone you should talk to as well. She's pretty cool.
Okay. What's the name?
Ariel Amaral. So her last name is Amarel.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's pretty cool. So like you got to talk to her.
All right.
So she had called me in September, and she had said, "Hey Maddie, we actually have a spot on Team Canada to go and compete at the ISA World SUP and Paddleboard Championships in China. Would you like to come?" And I just remember like being on the phone. I didn't say anything. I think I was like speechless. And I just said, are you sure you have the right Maddie? Like, you are calling me, right? And she just said, yep, like a spot opened up on the team. Like we have a place for you to come, like just come on out. And I actually had turned it down.
Oh,
Like
no.
back in September, I said, you know what? This is absolutely incredible. I am so honored that you thought of me to fill this spot for the team. But I can't do it. Like I'm just starting school. I can't take like 2 weeks off to just go and race. Like I have a thesis to write. I have interviews to do. Like I was so busy. I was so overwhelmed. And on top of that too, I was paying off like student debt, and I was like, I just don't have money to go.
Yeah.
Because stand-up paddleboarding, and you probably know this as well, unfortunately, there's no money in the sport. Like there's really not a lot. And so there was no way for me to get funding to go. And so Ariel was like, okay, like, well, maybe like if you change your mind, like let me know. And I just said, okay, thanks. Like,
Wow.
hung up the phone.
That must have been hard to walk away from.
Oh, it was, I thought about it for weeks. Like I
Yeah.
was so devastated that I had this amazing opportunity, but I just knew, I was like, I can't do it. I really can't. And earlier that year, I actually wanted to come out to BC earlier to compete at the Nationals, because that's where it's been hosted every year, I think for the past 3 or 4 years. And so I wanted to go out there, but my parents had sat me down and we had the conversation of like, you know what, it's really expensive to fly out there and like to get a board there. Like it's really complicated. And I, again, too, was just approaching my last semester at school, and we both just thought like, no, it's not a good idea. And that's where the Surf the Greats trip came in, because that was way more affordable. And so I don't know if you think that's crazy too, like flying across our country is more expensive than me to go fly down to Central America.
Oh, trust me, I've known about that for the last 12 years. It's like going home for Christmas or go to Hawaii. Like, it's just crazy. But you need to check, you're close to Hamilton. You can check out those new swoop flights. Those are a lot more affordable.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. My sister used to do a lot of flights actually to Edmonton for work and stuff. So, yeah, she's very familiar with Swoop, but I know I need to get on that.
I don't know about I don't know about traveling with your Sup on that airline or not, but you know, you could always get something out here.
Yeah, they may or may not have room for it, on those tiny flights.
So you said no. So what happened?
Yeah, so I said no, and it haunted me for a long time. But then about a month later, so it was close to Halloween, it was the end of October, Ariel called me again. And she had just said, Maddie, like, we've got this spot still, like we haven't been able to fill it. And one of our other team members, his name's Dan Miller, he will pay for your flight if you can come. Like we'll help you get a board here. Like we'll do everything that we can. Please just come. Like all you have to do is pay for registration to be on the team, and like let's do this.
Amazing.
And at that point, I just said, you know what, this is meant to be. Like this is the second phone call. I now have an affordable solution to this problem. I can't turn it down now. So I remember I just said, okay, just like give me a sec. I called my parents and I said, Ariel called me with this, and they're like, just go. Like
that's
just
one of those
it.
moments in life, you know, you have to do it when things line up that well.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I think my parents totally understood everything in that situation, and I honestly to this day, like I cannot thank them enough for just allowing me to go and to be able to have that experience representing Team Canada. And I'm very, very happy I got to go to China that year.
Yeah. So what was the outcome? What was the races like? What was that experience like?
It was absolutely life-changing. It was totally incredible. Like China definitely was not like a bucket list place for me. Like I never thought I would end up there. So to be there, getting there, I had a few like flight delays and challenges. So that taught me a lot of like traveling tips and how to be a better traveler. And then once I got there, like figuring out the food was pretty cool, because I have a very deathly allergic peanut allergy.
Oh no.
And so to figure out the food like in China, right, where they cook everything in peanut oil was a
Yeah.
challenge too, but it was so fun and exciting to try new foods and really explore out of your comfort zone from
Yeah.
home. But racing wise too, it was a lot of fun. It was very, I think theme of this podcast is humbling. It was a very humbling experience to be among the world's best, and by no way like was I in any shape to be there. Like, just I had come off of a great racing season in 2018 during the summer months, but having like the call in October to be like, hey, come to China, like a month to prep, I was just basically cramming in all my schoolwork and I had no time to train. And so I definitely could say in a very healthy way I got my butt kicked, but
Okay.
it was so much fun though. Like the
Yeah.
technical racing, I held my ground there. The reprecharge round was very hard. I almost made it into the top 10, but just missed it by a few spots.
Yeah.
And the distance race too, that was humbling because I had suffered an injury from the technical race and it came out in the distance, so I wasn't able to complete it. But to really come off the course and be like, okay, wow, this is what the world's best are doing, it's given me this humongous goal in my mind that I'm like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I think now if you were to call me up and say, hey, want to come back, I would be much better prepared,
Nice.
like physically and mentally.
Yeah.
But I don't regret like just going there and trying. And
The fact that you
representing.
got to do it is quite an achievement, right?
Exactly. Like just to say, like at least once in my life, like I got to represent Team Canada. Like there's no words to describe that feeling.
Yeah, that is so cool. And I'm sure there's tons of learning from your coaches and peers as well, right? That whole thing.
Yeah.
So what countries, we might not be aware of that are quite impressive in the Sup realm?
Ooh, Hungary. Hungary is incredible. Like,
Really?
I think that's where Bruno and Daniel Hazulio are from, and they both used to ride for Starboard, but I think just Daniel does now. And they come from like an amazing canoe and kayak sprinting background, and the guys there are so fast. And I actually think that's where the next ICF stand-up competition, like their world championships, is going to be next year. So it'll be really cool to see really the world's best compete in one of the best countries. And even though they're not on the ocean, like they have a lake,
Yeah, wow.
but they're not on the ocean at all, which is cool.
That is pretty cool. Hungary is hungry for Sup. Awesome.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, I was going to ask you something else about that. I'm kind of blanking. Oh, yeah. I am going blank a little bit on Starboard. Is Starboard the brand with the little like sort of tiki dude with the hair?
That's right. Live the tiki life. That's right.
Okay, yeah. I rode a Starboard quite a bit last year, a Sup Surf Starboard. Yeah, that was a nice board.
Ooh, do you know which model it was?
No, I don't, but I could find out. Yeah, it was quite a nice board. Real white on the bottom, bright pink on top. You could, see me out there quite easily. Yeah, it's a nice board.
That's
right
great.
on.
I definitely want to know what board you were on because I'm very curious. That's the next thing that's going in the Quiver is a Starboard Sup Surf. So
nice. Yeah. I think if I were to invest in any more hardboards, I'd probably go for Starboard for sure. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, most of my boards, I have 4 inflatable red paddles, which are amazing. Yeah. And then I have 2 or 3 surf techs, and then I have a Cascadia hardboard.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's for me and my students. But yeah, I'll have to get some diversify with some Starboard, and then I've enjoyed riding some Kahuna too.
Yeah, like the guys that surf the Greats, they actually have a lot of Kahuna boards. Like I think that's what they use for their rentals around here. And then, do you know Dan Tarno? actually,
No,
by any chance? No?
no.
Okay, he rides for Cascadia, and he brought those boards to China, and those were really cool. They actually looked like they had the Dalmatian kind of pattern, like they were white, but they had black spots everywhere. And
Oh, neat. Yeah,
yeah,
they have some cool designs and artwork on their boards.
yeah, that's really cool that you have a
So,
Cascadia.
so what is the future of competing for you? Do you see any more of that coming up, or is that kind of not the priority?
Oh, I think for sure. Like racing, it's the drug I can't get off of.
Okay.
I love it so much. Like it really puts a lot of goals into perspective for me and gives me this fire in my belly that I don't think will burn out for a very long time.
Hmm.
So ultimately, like a lot of my goals are towards that. But at the end of the day, too, though, I love how diverse stand-up paddling can be. Like I love how you can take it to just tour around, or like this morning I can just go for a very chill paddle with my dad and my brother and have some great time on the water. Like I think racing will always be the biggest motivating factor for me to get on the water, but it's not also the be all. And
Hmm. So in Ontario, when you're out paddleboarding, do you find that people react to you the same way you reacted to those guys in Sauble Beach? Like, are they pretty mesmerized by it, or has everyone sort of seen it now and they know what it is, and the curiosity is gone?
that's actually a great question because I feel like that has changed so much this year. Um, and I would have to say my answer is a bit of both because I think, again, like 100% of the time, unless I'm surfing, I bring out my race board. And so when I bring that out, a lot of people still don't know about the race scene here in Ontario. It's grown a lot over the past 5 years, like, and especially like since I've been involved and I've been so immersed in that community. I've seen it grown a lot. But yeah, a lot of people like on the Welland Canal or out on Lake Erie, because that's where I paddle most often. People do look at me and they're like, what is that? And actually, a lot of people think it's a kayak at first. They don't think it's
Yeah.
a sup board. So that always kind of makes me laugh. Um, but yeah, at the same time, though, I am seeing a lot more people out on, I guess you would say, like all round stand-up paddle boards. Like today on the canal, I would say for sure I saw at least 10 leisurely paddlers out there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, do you find it's the same where you are, like in the West Coast, or?
Yeah, I would say even here in Vancouver, when I'm out paddleboarding, I'm typically either by myself or I might see a handful of others. But it's nothing compared to the people walking along the seawall or riding their bicycles, right? I very much, just like growing up in a small town in Ontario, when I was out in the water, I was usually alone, and it was my sort of place of peace and solace and sanctuary. And even here, in a major city, I go out in the water, and I can still. The difference is I look to both sides, and there's these big buildings, and I'm in the city, and it's really cool um, to know that I am so alone in the middle of it all, and I feel like I have the best view. And I will say there's a lot of eyeballs that watch you. Yeah, definitely. And you'll be coming in and people come up and ask you about it and how they can, get into it. Or I don't know how many times I've been asked about, oh, what do you think about this board at Canadian Tire or at Costco? And I'm kind of like,
Oh no.
oh, well, if that's what you can afford, that's cool. But like, I can't really, if you can
Oh,
put your knee into the board and it bends, it's not a good sign. But a lot of people are pretty stoked, so I don't want to ruin that for them. But
yeah.
it's just good that people are getting out on the water in general. I find, you know, for me, I grew up a block away from the beach, so for me, that was my playground. I grew up fishing, and so the water for me was a very natural place. But I always have to remember that a lot of people, they didn't grow up that way, and they're not comfortable about the water. And a lot of people aren't going to go out of their way to get a paddleboard and go paddleboarding by themselves. They need some kind of encouragement, right? So, and that's why I encourage people to take lessons too, because that's a whole other thing. People look at it and they think, oh, what's there to it? You just stand up and paddle, right? But then they come in and their back's killing them because they were doing it all wrong, and and then they don't like it and they don't pursue it any further. So
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Like, actually, today when I was out on the water, I saw probably 50% of those paddlers that I saw just like leisurely paddling were holding the paddle backwards. And that to me, I'm like, oh my God, no, it's not a spoon. It's the other way. Like,
yeah.
and yeah, like, and I think it's truly like a know before you go too, right? Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people can get intimidated by that. Like, if they're not comfortable around the water or didn't grow up around it, I think they can be scared of bigger bodies of water. Like, I feel like in Vancouver, like by the seawall, it's a harbor. People probably think, oh, there's boats. Like, I'm not going there. And you probably know too, around the Great Lakes, like same thing. It's a big
Mhm.
body of water and people get intimidated. But if you have the right tools and the right equipment, especially, like, you can succeed. And it's so worth it, like
Yeah.
just when you're out there and you do get that moment of solitude, like there's something so therapeutic about it and really makes it worth it. But
Yeah.
I agree, if you don't know and if you just kind of say, okay, I'm just gonna like buy this and head out, I think too that's where it can be dangerous. Like, that's where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what are you doing? Like, come back, wear a leash, like simple things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You were mentioning about holding the paddle backwards. The other
yeah.
experience I've had is a lot of people who, you ask them what their paddling experience is, and oh, I'm an experienced paddler, but then they've never done a cross draw before. And you show them what that is, and it just like blows their mind. They're like, oh my God, I can turn so easily, right? So it's definitely worth doing the lessons. And I also thought that was funny about when you're comparing kayaks and paddleboards, because I find that that's the thing. There's so many kayakers out here, and some of them like to razz the paddleboarders. And I'll be out paddling, and I remember one time these kayakers came by, and they're like, "Oh, look, paddleboarding's so bad. You have to chain yourself to the board with a leash. Ha ha ha. Whatever."
No way.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Like, no big deal. But I'm thinking, hey, man, you can't stand up in that kayak. You can only sit down. I can stand. I can sit like a kayak if I want to. I can kneel on it if I want to. It's very versatile, right?
That is too funny. I've never heard anybody say that. You have to chain yourself to the board.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's hilarious.
The other thing in Ontario I'm curious about is because you're saying, the Great Lakes are so vast and the wind can come and it's just wow,
Yeah.
right? But have you ever explored some of the, rivers and things like that you can sort of journey through? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, like I love like the wide open space feeling of the Great Lakes,
Hmm.
and I've actually participated in the Lake Ontario paddle crossing for 2 years, and like, oh man, it's so cool to feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the lake.
Hmm.
But yeah, we do, I think a lot of people miss that aspect as well, is that we do have so many natural areas and really cool riverways around here, and especially in Niagara. So definitely one of my favorite paddling spots locally is the Welland River.
Okay.
And we have many sections of it because one of the beginning spots is close to Niagara Falls. So we have the water that flows out from the Niagara River to go over Niagara Falls. It's also controlled by the hydroelectric dam there. So some of it comes into the Welland River. And that part is really cool because you paddle there and the current's kind of strong and you look down and it's like blue water. It's so beautiful. But then you hit the next part of the Welland River that's close to Port Robinson, and then that's where the more natural part of the Welland River is, and the water just mixes in, and then you feel like you're paddling in chocolate milk. Like, it's all
Wow.
muddy, but the nature there is beautiful. Like, you're paddling in these trees and there's beaver dams everywhere, and I've seen deer once like on my
Oh,
paddleboard and they were on the shore. So yeah, and then our Welland River, it stretches all the way past like Welland, so into Welland, and then out to Wainfleet towards like Dunville, out that way. And yeah, like it's
Super
beautiful.
cool. Yeah. The wildlife, that's amazing. Yeah, coolest thing I saw was sup surfing in Tofino. Saw a school of porpoises come by. That was pretty cool.
No way.
Yeah, that
Get
was
out.
rad. Yeah. So you mentioned paddling across Lake Ontario. So what was that all about?
Yeah, so really cool actually. We have two paddlers from the GTA, Rob Kavik and Dan Mike Luck, and they both are prone paddlers. Actually, funny enough, they don't get on a sup board very often, but they had both competed in a race called Molokai to Oahu. So they had done the 32-mile downwinder from Molokai all the way to Oahu. And when they did that race, they were so stoked and came back home and thought, how can we replicate this on the Great Lakes? Because we have big bodies of water. We have 32 miles across, like one way or the other. So how can we bring this to our home? And so I think, I want to say it was about 2014 or 2015 that they created this race. So it was right around the time that I was just starting to get involved with the racing scene, but hadn't really done too much racing. And so I think in 2017, I had a couple girlfriends who were just like, hey, do you want to like sign up to do this as like a relay race? And I had no clue what I was getting into, but I was like, yeah, sure. That looks like fun. Like paddle across the lake. Yeah. But like now I look back and think, oh my God, Maddie, like, did you know what 32 miles means
Wow.
of paddling? Like that's 50 kilometers. Like that's a long way.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to my parents about it too. And I said, yeah, I signed up for this race across Lake Ontario. And they didn't know either, right? Because they definitely didn't know more than I did. And they just were like, okay, cool. Like, sounds like fun. Like, we'll give it a shot. And yeah, so 2017 was the first year that I competed in it with two other women. So we were a relay team of 3. And so I think I had about 3 or 4 shifts that day that were about 45 minutes. And we had an escort boat across the lake, so we each took turns. But the race, again, it's designed to be a downwind race. And so typically in Southern Ontario, and you probably know this too, by growing up on the lake in Lake Erie, we get the best waves when we have a south or a southwest, maybe sometimes easterly on Lake Ontario, but I like a southwest one more. And so we had really hoped and prayed for conditions to push us to Toronto. And we didn't get that. We had, I think it was 10-kilometer winds from the north with like gusts in the 20s. So, yeah, it was the exact opposite effect.
Yeah.
We were basically paddling over speed bumps because we had started in Niagara and finished in Toronto. And yeah, I think it took us about 9.5 hours that first year to cross the lake. And I look back and I think like, wow, that was such a kook moment. But I learned so much from it. And we got across safely and we had a really fun time. And that feeling was so addicting. Like I knew the next year I was like, I'm going back for that. But I had partnered with another paddling partner. So I changed up my relay team and we did it in a tandem. And so it was just the 2 of us the next year. So we both had some more paddling time and we had more favorable conditions. We had a bit of a westerly kind of wind. So it started off actually from the south and then the wind kind of clocked around throughout the day. So we ended on a little bit of side chop, but we mostly had a push in the morning. And so I think it took us just over 7 hours to get there the second year. So,
super cool. Wow, that's amazing.
A lot more successful. Yeah.
Sounds like the first year the sup gods were really challenging you guys.
Oh, the sup gods were like, Maddie, what are you doing here? Like, you're a kook. Go home.
Yeah, for real. So,
but they let me cross anyway.
Nice. So these days, it sounds like, what are you involved in now? I have here, it seems like you're involved in something called Sup Kids and that you do some guest lecturing and inspirational talks. What's that all about?
That's right. So I think a lot of the experiences that I've had that have come from stand-up paddleboarding and originated, again, if we take it way back, like from a tragedy, I think I was in my 4th year at Waterloo and I just thought, you know what, it's about time that I get up and I share these stories. I think my friends deserve to be remembered in a really special way. I think my story can inspire other people. And so selflessly, I just kind of thought, what if I share my story? And so I think, yeah, I was either in my third or fourth year of university. I just booked a room in like a classroom at Waterloo and just, it kind of invited a bunch of friends out. I was like, hey, want to come like hear my story of how I got into paddleboarding? And I don't think there was a big turnout. I think there was like maybe like 15 to 20 people. So not a lot, but it was really cool. Like how I just, like I look back and I think, how did you even do that? Like I just organized a group chat for people to come and to hear my story. And I had like a slideshow and pictures and from the first year of on board and how I got kind of started into racing, but I wasn't fully into racing yet either at the time. So it was just mostly sharing my fundraising story. And then ever since that year, it took off. Like, I think the most recent presentation I did, I was in Barrie and I spoke at the Barrie Canoe and Kayak Club. And I talked to them about how I got into the sport, but then I talked about events like the lake crossing and China and just how all of these unique experiences didn't just fall into my lap. Like it did come from hard work, but it came from a place of passion. And I think I just love spreading the message that if you have a passion in your life, no matter what it is, it's real and you can go after it and however you need to, and surround yourself with those good people who will support you and who will get you there. And yeah, so it's taken off so much. And I'll do Sup indoor workshops as well. I did one in my gym back in February. So I brought a board like in the snow. I'm carrying it across to stand on it in a gym and say, hey, here's how you paddle. Yeah, so I love sharing that story and sharing it in multiple different ways.
That's a great message. Wow. Yeah, no, people need to hear that. I wish I heard that like 20 years ago. So keep it up.
That's right. That's right. But you know what? It sounds like to me, like even just you being here and like on this podcast, like you know that passion that people have, and especially like lake surfers and paddleboarders. Like I think there's something so special about the water. And I haven't figured it out yet. I will. In my master's, I will. But yeah, it draws really cool people to it. Yeah,
I'd have to agree. The tribe is pretty unique. Yeah, I mean, for me, I always thought in the early days I felt very alone, and now it's just amazing to see the sport of SUP open up so many more doors. And then the Great Lakes surf scene is really on the rise in Canada. So yeah, it's just fantastic stuff.
Oh yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So yeah, my friend and I were actually having a conversation the other day about when we were in high school and how neither of us could remember, talking to a guidance counselor about the possibilities of what we could do later on, right? And I think it's really important to get that message in the high schools that there are more jobs than working at a factory or becoming a teacher, because those seem to be the only options that I heard of. I mean, maybe other people have had different experiences, but I really think kids need to know, like, especially today with the internet and the innovations going on and the rise in technology, like something that's not here today might be there tomorrow. So it's really a good time to dream and act on those dreams. And you're right, this podcast for me has been amazing so far. And even if I didn't make a penny, which, I hope I make a lot of pennies doing whatever I do, but it's really cool to be meeting cool people and to be putting yourself out there in an area that you are so passionate about and sort of feeding off that energy of other people.
Yeah.
Like yourself. It's great. Yeah. So that's really cool that you're, speaking to the youth and inspiring. So how does that plug into Sup Kids then? What's that all about?
Yeah, so Sup Kids is a stand-up paddleboarding curriculum, and it was founded by Lindsay Hawking back in 2014. And I believe she partnered with Starboard in 2015 to launch the program all over the world. So we essentially have what's called Sup Kids schools who have bought the curriculum. So you could be your own SUP, surf, paddling school. It can literally apply to any water sport. and these schools buy the program and then they get to run it wherever they are in the world. So I think we have 23 countries all around the world. We have 3 locations in Canada. So I think closest to you, if I butcher the name, it's Sycamus, BC. I think it's northeast of Vancouver for a few hours. Like it's actually kind of close to Alberta, I believe. Like
I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up later. Maybe you butchered the name so badly I don't
might
recognize
have.
it.
Yeah. Oh, my family actually makes fun of me for that because I say names so wrong. It's horrible.
or maybe you nailed it and I just don't know my BC geography good enough because I still don't. After 12 years, I still don't.
Oh.
You know, it's funny, like living here, you're sort of sandwiched up against the coast. You know, it feels like there's less directions to go, whereas that spot you're at in Ontario, you sort of feel like North America is your oyster. You can kind of go any direction.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. Yeah,
it's different here because, you know, you have sort of the Rocky Mountains on one side and then the ocean on the other, and then this wild North Country above you, and then the U.S. below. So it actually feels a little more enclosed in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I find actually a lot of my friends like that I paddle with that are from Vancouver, like they always say, oh, like the East Coast, eh? And I'm like, I am not East Coast. Like that's like Nova Scotia and Halifax. Like I consider like Ontario to be very central.
Yeah, no, Canada. I know. I'm an East Coaster. That's what I'm told. I'm like, even though it's like a 24-hour drive to the ocean. Yeah, that's right. Pretty funny. The other one, hopefully you've never heard before, but maybe you have perhaps, is have you ever been told that you're from Ontario?
No.
Yeah, okay. I know, I was quite sensitive to that when I first moved here. Yeah, it was sort of
mean.
and but then below the surface you get talking to people and 9 out of 10 people are from Ontario anyhow, and they've just jumped a bandwagon.
It's actually, that is so true too, because when I went to the island last year with my brother and we were in the very small town of Sydney, BC, we had spoken with a lady who had an art shop just along the coast. So it was like right by the event site. She was like, oh yeah, I'm from St. Catharines in Niagara. And we're like, oh my God, that's like 15 minutes down the road from us. Yeah. And then I actually went to a physiotherapist clinic there because of my back injury from China in the previous year. It was still pretty bad before the competition. And he had done his master's at Western in London. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, yo, you're from Ontario too. Like, this is way too cool. Like, everybody's moving out to BC, but
it really is. Yeah, there's when you get chatting to people, it seems like there's very few Vancouver natives actually. Yeah. So we're
people like the ocean.
Yeah. So we're kind of coming up to the end here, but I'm really curious, what are your short-term goals, and then where are we expecting to see you down the line in the far future? What are you going to do?
Where's life going to take me?
And it's not going over the falls on a sup board.
That's right. We're not going over the Niagara River. That's right.
Unless they install, some kind of like rockets on them or something.
Yeah. Have a parachute at the back just before you jump off. No, that's a fantastic question. I think I relate the analogy to stand-up paddleboarding a lot. I'm definitely a go with the flow kind of person. So right now I'm doing my master's at Brock, and again it is researching stand-up paddleboarding, but it actually entails the Sup Kids program. I'm going to be collecting my data from the Sup Kids program, like sitting at a camp and watching it happen. And so I'm hoping that my master's empowers me to do work with children when I'm done. So what exactly that'll look like, I don't know. Maybe you and me will make a school together and we can get kids. Like, I want to have a school someday for sure. Whether that'll be in Welland or in the Niagara region at all, or somewhere else in the world, I don't know. But that's definitely a long-term goal, I guess, for the future. And
Cool.
short-term would be to finish the Masters.
Yeah, finish. Right
to finish
on.
it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I only see good things for you. That's super cool. If you ever need a test guinea pig for your studies, I'm on board. Okay.
Hey, I love it.
And I think one day you and I need to cross a lake together. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I think so. We could be like the first mixed double team.
Oh,
the first mixed tandem team.
Yeah, maybe
there hasn't been one yet.
Really? Okay.
The race got canceled for this year. So maybe in the future when you move back here.
And you have some kind of world record, don't you? For something?
Well, for the lake crossing, we in 2018, when I crossed with Danielle Holdsworth, we beat the tandem record, actually. So 7 hours and 10 minutes was the fastest that any double team had crossed the lake. So
wow. So is your name in the Guinness Book of World Records?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh.
I don't know how much Guinness cares about stand-up paddleboarding, but maybe they should after this. So.
Yeah, really. So when you're not paddleboarding, what else are you stoked about?
What else am I stoked about?
Sounds like you like cooking, right? Cooking?
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, COVID-19, for making me a good cook.
Yeah.
That would not have been a product if COVID-19 wasn't a thing. But yeah, I think honestly, in general, just being active and being out in nature. Like, I love hiking. I love swimming. I love anything else on the water too. I'm trying to convince my parents to help me buy a prone board. I'm like, that looks like fun. I want to try that.
Nice.
I love yoga. I love reading. Like, so many little things here and there I love to do.
Cool. Right on. And hey, during these COVID times, I like to ask people, because, sort of feel like I'm running out of content sometimes. Are you watching anything cool, reading anything cool?
Yeah. So, I mean, for my thesis, I'm required to do a lot of academic journal reading. So unfortunately, I'm not actually like reading anything kind of like super fun at the moment. But for watching, I don't know if you've been like checking out World Surf League, but they have like these great rewind episodes of the championship tour from last year. And they've cut them down into like 5 episodes that each episode is like no more than 10 minutes.
Okay.
And so it doesn't take up a lot of your time. And for me, like, my day is so busy that I only have enough time to watch like 2 or 3 episodes that are like 7 minutes long at night before I go to bed. But those have been pretty cool, and they keep me like super stoked. Like, they make me so passionate to train harder, to work out harder, and to like be inspired by world champions.
Right on. I'll have to check those out. Yeah, I've seen those come across in the emails. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen it in the newsletter. So
yeah, they've done like a fantastic job at like telling the story of how this event unfolded last year. Like, I think I just finished the Margaret River Pro, and that was really cool. That was
right on.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, is there anything left that you got to get off your chest that you want to tell the audience? And then also, if you have anything to plug or somewhere people can reach you, be sure to let us know that too.
Oh, well, honestly, I think I just mostly want to say, like, thank you so much for letting me come on the show today. I always take a shot in the dark when I reach out to people and say, hey, can we chat? So I honestly cannot thank you enough for just letting me be here today and to share my paddling stories. It means a lot to me and to my family too, because all of my paddling initiatives, it's not just me, it's my family. They back me up too. So shout out family on Father's Day too. And I guess to find me, my Instagram is at Maddi3Leblanc, but I do also have a website, which is just my name. So www.maddileblanc.com. And hit me up, guys, if you're stoked to just get on the water. I do private lessons, I do public lessons, and I love getting the kids out. So if your kid wants to come, let's go. And I guess stay stoked. Derik?
Very sweet. Yeah, thank you. No, it's great to have you on the show. I'm really glad you reached out to me. This is one of the best parts, is getting to know cool people like yourself, and seeing what is going on out there. And for me, my work history has been, the last 12 years has been fully ingrained in nonprofit work. I've worked with kids, I work with vulnerable adults, seniors, everybody. So it really touches my heart to hear these innovative ideas. And for me, actually, that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm trying to, working with people is good, but it can be challenging, and it can be hard being absorbed in those sad situations a lot. So I actually have found quite a bit of healing and positivity for myself in some of these more sort of methods that are maybe for people who are a little further along in their path and are ready to really get back to life. And those are things like yoga and paddleboarding and surfing. And so for me, I'm really enjoying this shift of using all my own skills, but now bringing that into something that also brings me a bit of leisure and gets me a little more stoked. So it's really cool to be bridging the two together. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. So it's super awesome to meet you, and super inspiring, and glad you're doing what you're doing. And I'm sure we're going to connect again. And when I get in Ontario, we'll go for a paddle and have some fun together. Okay.
Heck yeah. Yeah. When you come over, you let me know. We're going. It's
Right
a date.
on.
We're paddling.
Will do. Perfect. All right, Maddie. Mahalo for being on the show, and stay stoked.
Thank you. Thanks, Derik.